My name is Dan Vlamis, and pleased to talk to you about kind of help you get started with property graphs running in the Oracle database. I'm going to start with intro remarks. If people walk in during it, that's fine. So we can go ahead and get started and make maximum use of our time here. Also, I'll mention I have some literature here in case you're interested in more stuff, including got some nice little magnets that you can put on your whiteboard with analytic poetry. So if you want one of those kits for analytic poetry, words like analyze, statistic, protect, bacon, things like that, we have those available for you. Anyway, my name's Dan Vlamis. With Vlamis Software Solutions, I founded over 25 years ago. We've developed all sorts of BI and analytics systems. Also now working, as you'll see, with the property graphs in the Oracle database. We specialize in enterprise BI, analytic warehousing, data mining, predictive analytics, and data visualization. Indeed, I'm an author along with my brother on a book on data visualization for Oracle Business Intelligence, and have worked a long time in the industry. As well, I came from a company that was bought by Oracle for IRI, and I'm an Oracle ACE director. And I'll mention also, I'm a PGOL board member. There's a conference we're putting on, I'll plug at the end, that I'm actually the conference director for, called the Analytics and Data Summit, taking place just on March 20 through 22. If you're interested in these types of topics, you'd love that type of conference just taking place at Oracle headquarters. All right, so today, just getting into this, I'm going to start out and show a quick demo. By the way, I'm giving live demos. So hopefully the demo gods, I did give an offering just before the session started to try and help out the odds of a good demo on this. But we'll do that quick demo of what you can do with property graphs. And then I'm going to give a little bit of background on going through how you can use property graphs in the Oracle database. Some of the background, if you're not familiar with it, try and catch you up to speed. But the whole goal is to show you how you can get started with using property graphs in the Oracle database. I'll go through those steps. Indeed, there's a blog entry that a colleague of mine, Arthur Dayton, wrote up, and it's in the PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure how they're distributing the slides. They're also available on our website, but you can download, and there's a blog entry that goes through in detail how to get started with a virtual machine, so you can go through and do all of this that I'm showing. Then really the majority then is this demo of using property graphs using some open software called Cytoscape is what I'll be using to visualize those property graphs. And then we'll talk about some next steps that you can use, some resources that you can use to get started with that, and how you can join the Analytics and Data Summit Conference, and some resources. By the way, I'll give a quick plug in case people walk out before. Z Wu is from Oracle, from the development organization. He'll be speaking later on this afternoon, and I'm sure either one of us would love to talk to you more about what you can do with the graphs and some more details. And I'm kind of standing on some of the stuff that Z and his group has developed. So with that, let me just give you an introduction. Before going into that, I don't know if you guys have been in those. Yeah, we're going to give you a framework, what you're going to learn, and all these PowerPoint slides go on. I like to show kind of the stuff up front to see why you would care. So let me just start out with a quick demonstration of what this stuff looks like with property graphs. So I've zoomed in at this point. This is a property graph of, you'll see individuals and how they relate in an organization. And so at this point, this is a hierarchical view of what's traditionally an org chart. And in that, I can see individual nodes, which are basically people, and then relationships between those nodes. So let me try and get a sense of the audience. All right, how many people here are familiar with network graphs, RDF graphs, the concept of a graph of a relationship of various entities and links between those entities, which are these edges that you see? If I zoom in enough, you can see that those people are managed by Den Rafali. And how many people are familiar with this concept of links and nodes and edges? Okay, so people have seen this type of stuff. This is classic computer science theory type stuff that I learned in school. This is the type of stuff that we can do now, and the graph is actually stored in the Oracle database, and we're getting this data from there, populating the graph, and then visualizing it. I'm running in a virtual machine. I'm running something called Cytoscape inside this window to look at that. If I load some other visualizations of this, let me just show you, and just trying to load some previous things that we've looked at. If I look at this, here's another look at a bunch of relationships between all of these different types of people and how they interrelate with each other. We'll go through some typical examples of why you'd care about this type of stuff, but these graphs, this is just an example, a blow-up of this very complex graph. This could be terrorist networks that you're looking at, how these people are related. They could have departments they work for, companies they work for, all those types of relationships. And by visualizing this type of data in this mechanism, you can have insights that really no other visualization provides this type of visualization for this, and uncover insights that you otherwise would not have. Okay, so that's my quick intro of just what these things are. Let me give some background then on why you might care about this stuff and how you might apply it, and how this applies. All right, so that's my quick little demo. There are two graph models that are built into then the Oracle database on this, and a lot of people don't realize they unload data from other types of environments just so they can do this type of analysis, and they don't realize that a lot of this is built into the software that they've been using for years and years and years. Two of the things in there right now, different types of graphs, are a property graph model I'll go through. It's typically seen as a simpler model to work with, and it's relatively new in the Oracle database. But you've got this property graph model, often used for social network type of analysis, looking at things, algorithms like path analytics, shortest path, that type of thing, or social network analysis, the different entity analytics, looking at individual nodes or entities on a diagram, often used in financial industries, retail, marketing, social media, how are people related to each other, smart manufacturing, that type of thing, is your typical uses of property graphs. There's also a RDF data model that's built in as well for things like linked data semantic web type things, for data federation, representing knowledge in there, often used in places like life sciences, healthcare, publishing, finance, again, all those types of things. So there are many different uses of this type of data, and you'll see how we can transform from one set of data to the other set of data. I'm going to give you an example of that. All right, so then some of the, looking at Oracle as a graph database, some of the features of it, it provides for a lot of scalability and performance because you're running on, basically one of the reasons is you're running on a big server. It is designed for, just like Oracle database has always done, page things in and out of memory. You're not limited by the memory size, that type of thing. It's designed for scalability and performance. You can do the graph analytics in here, visualize the graphs on there, and there is a graph query language. We'll talk about that later on. There are also some standard interfaces. This is being done in a concert with other bodies that are developing standards on how to develop these types of query languages. And then there's also integration with machine learning type tools looking at this. So some of the things that you can do are things like identify your influencers. When you're looking at a diagram of the data, if you are visualizing the data with how many links are from a given node, you can find out who the influencers in your organization are. Some of the examples are things like if you are looking at examples of data of who are the knowledge workers in our automotive manufacturing plant? If we look at the various emails that are sent back and forth amongst the technicians, what technician is responsible for most of the successes when we are able to solve a problem. These are the types of things you can do with graph analytics. You can discover patterns in big data and look at the clusters that naturally form in your data. You can also use it for doing things like generating recommendations. So a recommendation engine can often be looked at as a graph. If you like these types of things, we think you might like this. This is the type of thing you can do by looking at a graph. And as I mentioned, Z is going to get into more of the application. He's going to talk about this, especially in regards to blockchain and how you use it with that. But we'll probably talk about more examples of uses of this. So some of the use case scenarios include something like in a finance, looking at customer 360 type of analysis, things like fraud detection. Look at how people are linked to each other. Are there transactions that are taking place that are really, frankly, money laundering? If it's easy to tell if it's just a two-person situation, but what if there's a ring of transactions that end up happening? How do you analyze that in a graph it shows up? In public sector, you can look at things like tax evasion or crime network analysis, who's related to whom or who talks to whom. A natural way of looking at this is via telephone calls. Each link between two people would be potentially a phone call, and you see how those people are related. In retail, you might look at recommendations, sentiment analysis, this type of thing, or in manufacturing, a complex bill of materials. Look at those types of things via a graph. So let's dive into this a little bit. I'll show you how to get started in just a little bit. But here's what the property graph data model looks like. I might have these nodes, and the nodes are signified in here as those circles that you see that right now are known by their node ID or their number that this is on. So this is node number 1. This is node number 3, 6, and so forth. Then you might have associated with each node, you have various properties. And so you can see in green the properties of, for instance, node 1. There's a property called name, and that is the Marco node. And I might have, for instance, what Marco's age is. So there's a property of that person of what their age is. And you can display it on the graph or hide that on the graph and then do analytics on those types of things and exception analysis and all that based on those types of properties. Everybody with me so far? All right. Then each of those nodes then can be linked to other nodes via a set of edges or links. All right? So each one has an in-out. Notice that there are directed. There are arrows that are indicating that, for instance, Marco created, in this case, LOP, all right, and the language in Java. So you could have entities that they don't have to be the same type of thing. You can have different types of vertices or nodes, different types of entities. And so node number 1 created node number 3. You can also have a relationship between node 1 and down here on node 4. And I can have that Marco knows Josh, okay, as an example. And then for each of these links or edges, you can have a weight that's applied or various properties of those edges. All right? So that defines the relationship between these different things, and it's a way of looking at your data to try and figure out how do we best visualize that type of data. All right, so then how do we relate this then? I'm assuming most people here are familiar with a relational data model. After all, you're at an event called Oracle Code, so you probably have some familiarity, I'm guessing, with Oracle and maybe the Oracle database. So you have a relational model looking at the differences between that versus a graph model. In a relational model, you have tables with things like people, a code of 12, and there might be Tom. And then you might have departments that have numbers such as 142 and 145, various departments they're in, and then you might have another table with the various memberships that says that Tom is a member of all of these different departments. And then these memberships are a way of defining, if you will, those edges in a table lookup. And you'll see how we did this in loading this, just as a quick getting started example. So let me show you then a little bit of the architecture of what this looks like. So the property graph support that's in Oracle. At the bottom, let me start down at the bottom, you have the Oracle Relational Database Management System, Oracle RDBMS. By the way, it could also be an Apache HBase or NoSQL database. And there's something called Oracle Big Data Graph coming out where you store, instead of things on the Oracle database, you store it instead on the big data machine, on a big data machine really kind of your choosing. Then you have a graph data access layer that accesses all of that data via various Java APIs, JDBC, SQL, PL SQL. We'll show you some examples of that. And then at the top, you typically have graph analytics that are looking at things with the in-memory graphs, looking at the data via this language called PGX. Let me show you examples of that. It's a language that's being proposed by Oracle as a standard by that. Then off to the side, we have REST web services and notebook technology that then can get at the data via Java, Groovy, Python, something like that. And then you have various property graph formats in GraphML, GML, GraphSon, and flat files. But this is what you're looking at when you're looking at property graphs in the Oracle database. Some of the things then, Cytoscape, which is the example that I'll use. It's not the only type of graph visualization, property graph visualization software. There are others as well, is accessing via the graph analytics and goes down and gets at the data through the data access layer. So then what does that look like when you're visualizing your property graphs with Cytoscape? Cytoscape then supports property graphs. You just download it. I'll give you an example of that. It connects to the Oracle database or this NoSQL database or Apache HBase. And then it has built into it all sorts of different algorithms, including things like PageRank, clustering, shortest path, how do I get from one node to another, those types of things. And it provides an alternative to having to do everything via command line, trying to get at this via in-memory analytics, or and you have to first have the base graph created. So the thing that I'll tell you I ran into in preparing for this presentation was I want to show all this stuff in Cytoscape. I worked with another guy in my team by the name of Arthur, and Arthur actually created the scripts that I'm showing you. He's the one that put together the blog entry. And my challenge was I just wanted to play with the full graph. It's cool stuff, right? How do I have at least some data I can play with? And the purpose of the blog entry that Arthur wrote plus what I'm presenting today is to try to give you a sense of this is how you can play with this stuff too. And once you start looking at it, you'll say, oh, you see all sorts of opportunities for using property graphs in the type of analytics you may need to do for your company. So, some of the examples of what you can do with PGQL is look at pattern matching. It has an SQL type-like syntax, but there's a graph pattern description, and you can access the various properties. It's designed for interactive and real-time analysis. It supports aggregations, comparisons, min, max, order by, group bys. All these types of things that you would especially want to do are built into PGQL. You can also find patterns in graphs for things like fraud detection, anomaly detection, extract out a subgraph of this, and as mentioned, that's a proposed standard by Oracle. The specification is available online on that, and it has a open source front-end parser, and the information is a GitHub PGQL language. Okay, you can look that up. The slides, by the way, for all of this are available on our website at vlamis.com under presentations, and I think they'll be available for everybody attending the conference through the normal mechanisms for doing that. I've submitted them actually a couple times for getting this. So this is an overview of then how to start with this. I just wanted to give this to get you guys going. The blog article that details this through where to get the virtual machine to have some data that you can play with, how to then transform, starting with that virtual machine, into your own property graph, and then all of the steps that I'm going to go through are in this blog entry with that big long URL. It's a blog entry, and all the details are in there. So this is what you end up doing. This is the general approach. Find some kind of data that includes some nodes and some relationships, okay? In our example, we used a schema. How many people here are familiar with the HR schema that Oracle has that uses for a lot of examples? People there? Yeah? Heard of it? Okay. If you haven't, there's others in your organization that have. It's with, you log in with Scott, yes, password Tiger, then I just started with that because, or Arthur started with that because it was just easy to start with that. You have employees, and employees have managers, and they have relationships with each other, with peers, and that type of thing. So find some kind of data in some tables. Then get your environment set up. All right, I don't know about you, I hate setting up the stupid environment so I can do stuff. So I like to start, in my case, with a virtual machine that's available for downloading. This one's on oracle.com out of Tech Network. You just download this VM, I think you could actually run this on the Oracle Cloud. I'm not sure, but I'm sure you could find somebody from Oracle that would love for you to be able to do that. So anyway, take that, move it up to the Oracle Cloud, or run it on your own network. And then start with that VM, installing Eclipse. You need some kind of Java environment at this time in order to instantiate the graph. I'll give an example. There's a little patch to install. By the way, that patch is detailed in the log. It's not in the blog article. It's not a big deal. You then also need to download Cytoscape and Cytoscape for Oracle app, the Cytoscape for Oracle app, so that you can link Cytoscape up to Oracle. That's all in just getting the environment set up. Then you can create the views to get the data into a graph-ready form. So that's taking what's in raw relational and converting it into some views that you can load in as a graph. Then you end up using Eclipse to write just a little bit. It's just a little bit of Java code to create your graph. So you do that. In our case, we used Eclipse. You don't have to use Eclipse. You could use whatever environment you want for writing Java. And then you're on to running Cytoscape, and you can start playing with your graph and start looking at stuff. So let's go ahead and get into that, and I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like. People got the general approach to all this? All right. So let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to just show you around a little bit. This is SQL Developer, and this is the schema that we're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and let me come in and connect up to this. And let me look at the raw tables that are listed in here, and I'm going to look at these views. So I've got an employees view, and let me look at the data behind that. This is a bunch of employees. So you can see all the different employee IDs. Here's the names of them in this column. I know probably in the back you can't read them, but trust me, there's a bunch of employee IDs. That's what these numbers are. And then these are the names of each one of those employees. Then we've got a department for each one of the employees, and we've got what their salary is and who their manager is. And you can see a bunch of these are managed by Stephen King, happens to be the manager name. We've got a hire date, job title, and just a manager ID. Now, this is actually a view that we created off of the HR data, but it could have just as easily been, this is the table you start with. Okay, we wanted to be able to get the employee ID and the manager ID, and it's just a lot easier to describe this stuff if you show the manager name in here. We're just doing a join to get the manager name and such. That's what I mean by creating a view that then ends up, this is ultimately going to be the node, the list of nodes that we have. All right? So then I'm going to come here and look at this employee relation. So this relation is between individual nodes. Remember you saw the circles and how they're related to each other? You want to be able to say this guy manages this. So this is then a list of a list of edges that then have this relation ID, and all we did You know, there's no rocket science behind this. All we did was slam the source with the destination, concatenate them together, and so I have a relation ID of 100, 102 is from 100 to 102. Okay, that's the edge between those two. And we've gone ahead and described some manage edges, and then we also, while we are at it, we described some colleague edges. So these are two employees that are colleagues of each other. Right? You can do that through joins. My purpose is not to show you how you can do that type of view. My purpose is to get into the property graph stuff. So I'm not going to dwell on this portion of this. All we need is some data to load. Everybody with me so far? All right. So, and as I said, all the details are in the blog entry that goes through all of this. So now let me come out of SQL Developer and see what do we do with this thing once we have it. All right, so I've created these views. You can look at the view description. I'm not going to go into that because it's kind of boring. It's not the exciting stuff. All right, so now we need to get that into a property graph. So I'm going to show you the Java that we wrote in order to create that. You just need a connection. Here's the Oracle connection. And then, you know, there's a bunch of things in here. And this is, by the way, right out of the documentation in order to create this type of stuff. This is not stuff where all we had to do is fill in the name of our instance as opposed to the one that comes out of the documentation and such. And then we just define a bunch of attributes and a column to attribute mapping. Here's my full name. I'm going to map that to something called name. I'm going to take the column called department name and call it dept. All this type of stuff you end up doing in Java, and then this defines my vertexes and my graph configuration that I'm doing as I go through this. All right, and then ultimately we load the graph with the files. That's all this is in down here. Load and create and instantiate a property graph. So all we're doing is creating this thing in Java so that we can have a property graph that we can then query. Like I said, the details on what the code looks like is all in the example. So let me then go ahead and show through then what we can do with this now that we've loaded. People familiar with, oh, by the way, yeah, I would not be surprised if the ability to then create a property graph starts being added in other tools that Oracle has out. Right now, you run a Java application to create this. Would not surprise me if they make it a little easier in the future. You all are in the forefront of this. So, you know, dust off the Java book. You can do it. That's why when we created it, we called it You Can Do It. It's not that hard. That's the name of our Java program. So then what does that look like once I create it? So now I'm connected with Cytoscape. So then I'm going to go ahead and create a connection in here and show you what that's like. So this is Cytoscape itself. I'm going to load a property graph and I'm going to connect to an Oracle database. This is the type of connection I have. When I created this, whoops, I forgot to show that. All right, so the name of the graph is third_PG. Guess how many times we tried this to get this to work? This is our third try trying this stuff as we were going through it. All right, and this is where we set the name of this and the password, all that type of stuff. Not very super secret on here. All right, so I'm going to say I want to connect up to this graph using Scott, and I'm going to start from a PGQL query. So here's my JDBC URL. This is how I'm going to connect up. And I'm going to go ahead and type in, and this is the PGQL language. All right? And I'm going to select, this is the syntax that you use for PGQL. You select what you want, and what you call this is actually not that important. What's important, and you can't see it very well here. Let me try and do this. Let me make this a little bigger. Because I think you do want to see this. See this select n, e, t, whoops, where paren s, paren e, minus, then those are in brackets, e, that's what defines an edge, points to, and then t. Those things define what I'm going to call it, but what's important is the syntactic elements with the grammar that's in there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. And actually, I want to make this a little simpler. So I'm going to actually only look at manage edge. All right, so I'm going to specify select N, E, and T where N connected up to the edge, just the manage edge, so I'm specifying that, points to T. And I'm going to go ahead and magnify this guy. All right, and go ahead and execute that. And that is going to execute this query and load it into Cytoscape. So here it loads, and this is what the result of that query looks like. All right, if I zoom in, you can see I've got various nodes. And one of the things I wanted to point out is actually from just the base way this is displayed, can anybody tell where the root node is? Becomes very obvious when you look at things via a graph, right? It's this one in the center. I can come in here and I can also specify various properties. Perhaps I want to, instead of looking at things in the vertices via their default ID, I want to look at a property label, and I want to label it with the name. So now when I said I want to label it with the name. All right, then apply those changes, and now when I zoom into this guy, so let's keep our eye on that guy in the middle, is that guy's Stephen King, all right? And so I can see all the people that Stephen King manages, and it arranges it out on the screen. Then what you've got built into Cytoscape, and my goal here, by the way, was not to sell you all on how great Cytoscape is. It's to introduce you to this concept of property graphs and what you can do with them. But now, when I look at Cytoscape, I have a front end that is designed for manipulating and transversing through this property graph and display interesting information about that property graph. So I can come in here, change things like, look at the property, I can filter down to just those where salary, and mind you, I'm just getting started with this stuff, but you know, where the salary is greater than 3,300, let's say, something like that. Apply those changes, and then that will filter down to just those parts of it. Well, I'll get everything in this case. I can also color code. Let me show you some examples that I've gone ahead and created for here. If you look at this, here's one where we're using, I don't care about this. All right, so now this is looking at, built into the Cytoscape app, is the ability to have all sorts of layout options and do things like, this says circular layout, all right? Or a hierarchical layout, all right, developed by Y-files, or organic layout. All these different types of ways of looking at the data, filtering it through, looking at, for instance, color coding by department, all of that is, this is a visualization tool designed for looking at graph data. So now when we look at stuff hierarchically and zoom into this, I can see what the org chart looks like, right, as kind of an org chart. So I can see down here, this is what Nancy Greenberg has, these people that she's managing, what it looks like. So you can see, you know, employee relationships is a natural way of looking at those types of things. Let me show you some other examples. If I come in here and look at this by all sessions in here, and look at, this is all of the relationships, and what I'm going to show in here is the natural clusters that happen in an organization. As you look at this, you can see this is a series of people that are all related to each other. And once you start looking at things with graph analytics, you'll find the natural combinations in your data in how they're related to each other and how you can see stuff. So now I can change what nodes, and this is also manipulation area. I can come in here and look at, for each one of those, I can diffuse, edit, look at the preferences for each one of these, add various networks, extract out portion of the graphs. all that type of stuff. Look at various properties of each one of these, all right? So as we come in here, I can look at each one of these properties, depending on what you've loaded in. Let me show you some other examples in here. Whoops, that's the same one that I showed before. So now when I'm color coding these, if you look at a circular more layout, you can see how these individual nodes relate to each other, look at the various departments, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's what, then down here, you can see the edge table. This is the list of edges, network table, and frankly, I'll tell you, I am not a Cytoscape guy. I just picked this up just a couple weeks ago before preparing for this presentation, so it's not like I'm all into this. I just wanted to show you all how to get started. Now let me ask, anybody in here specifically used this stuff and you know, is all over this, and why isn't he showing how to do the such and such? There's some cool features of Cytoscape. Okay, well, anyway, you're welcome to come on up afterwards and we'll work with the graph together. I just wanted to basically especially give you a way to start with that, and I want to be able to leave some time for questions. That's the whole goal, is just how to get started with looking at things with graphs. A couple of things I want to mention. I mentioned before a conference. If you're into this stuff, you may be interested in something called the Analytics and Data Summit. It takes place just later in March, March 20 through 22. You can go to analyticsanddatasummit.org. There's information on there. By the way, if you're serious about this, let me know. I've got cards. Be happy to give you a discount code that you can use to get, there's one coming out. I run the conference, so I know when the discount codes are coming out. Okay, so see me if you're interested. Be happy to send you more of that. There's one coming out to give people a discount based on St. Patrick's Day. So come and join us. There is a special. We join with the Spatial and Graph Special Interest Group, and they're putting on all sorts of 10 different graph sessions, 24 spatial and graph sessions, all in a 3-day conference out at Oracle headquarters. They're running before that is a graph developer training day if you're really interested. This is a full day just on graphs. Full day workshop, free to talk to people at the Oracle product team. It's targeted towards developers, architects, and so forth. Here's where you can get an agenda. Again, the slides will be available, and you can say, hey, I'd really like to attend that and learn more about that. I got exposed at Oracle Code and want to learn more. There's a bunch of great resources on this. This is what I used to put together the presentation. So there's a spatial and graph big data, spatial and graph on OTN, various white papers, software downloads, the blog articles on here in blogs.oracle.com/Oracle Spatial, or again, this is that same URL that tells you how to get started. There's also a Big Data Lite virtual machine that you can get started with, and there's a hands-on lab that's included in there. Other resources in the Spatial and Graph SIG user group, and there's also every month they're having Ask Tom office hours where you can learn. You see demos more. Frankly, if this just scratched the surface, you want to see more examples of use cases, you can go out to the Ask Tom office hours and see that and ask questions in there. Also, Z, if you wouldn't mind, wave your hand. Z is going to be presenting afterwards at 4:20 on analyzing blockchain and Bitcoin transaction data using graphs. So going through in much more detail a specific use case of using blockchain and Bitcoin transactions using that. If you want to learn more about Vlamis.com, we've got this. This is the information for Arthur that helped me put this together, and my information, my email address, and would love for you to tweet to me, say, hey, I'd like to learn more about this stuff, follow me on LinkedIn, that type of thing. And then once again, here is that URL for getting the details behind that. That's what I especially have to present today. I'd love to be able to take questions, and we'll invite Z if he has other stuff to share with you all. With that, as I mentioned, I've got cards on this that I can talk about, but let me try and make sure I don't overextend, stay my welcome. Let's see if there are any questions people have. Yeah.
In addition to the abstraction layers built from views in order to generate the joins, what specific features are needed for the database as it relates to Flappy?
Okay.
Did you take advantage of to implement this, or is that something you didn't cover?
Okay, so question was, what specific features did I use in order to get the data ready to be in graphs? This is just simple joins, folks. No, there's no tricks up the sleeve here. If we look at that, if I come into SQL Developer and come back here and look at the employee relation and look at the details behind this, it's all in here. These are the views that I used. Create or replace view employees as, select, blah-de-blah as, and then you can see we're constructing the name from the first name and the last name to slam them together. Complicated stuff using concatenation. I used, some left outer joins in joins and then some where clauses. All I'm doing is doing that. There's no fancy stuff in here.
But what value did this presentation have as it relates to Oracle database? Because it could be any database back in the same stream of data. It could be a REST service to generate the data that you then encapsulate in a
Yeah. So what value does the Oracle database provide in this? The Oracle database is what's providing the Oracle graph capability. And there is an option in Oracle database called Oracle Spatial and Graph. And the graph is provided by the Oracle database. This is not a set of other software you're loading onto your database server. The graph is created in the Oracle database. Z, anything else to add to that? I'll put you on the spot. Sorry, I warned you.
Some additional values provided by Oracle database. We use action and no action value. We have advanced compression. And also, natively in the database, we can run analytics and choice. We have 6 and also run right there inside.
So if you couldn't hear people in the back, I'm sure, in the Oracle database, they also have some optimizations, some algorithms, such as, for instance, shortest path is running in the Oracle database. So the big difference you have is your big iron that's running your Oracle database is available for the graph itself, and then over time, more and more algorithms will be added, I'm sure, in the Oracle database to be able to do some of those types of traditional algorithms. This is much like if people have done stuff with data mining, where there's data mining built into the Oracle database, and cube management that's built into the database, in memory. All this is in the Oracle database. And a lot of people don't realize it's more than just a relational store. So what I was trying to show is pulling data from a relational store, but then doing the analysis. That's what I'm connecting to, is an Oracle database for that. All right, I got time for one more question. Anybody else? Some questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What about overlay of relationships? We have more than one layer.
What about overlay type of relationships? More than one layer is what I heard. You could have individual nodes. You can have different types of relationships. And I think if I'm understanding, it's more like layers, much like an architectural diagram. You have an electronics layer, and an electrical and a plumbing layer, and you have the framing of the building, all those types of layers looking at. And I would think you could do the same thing with property graphs, where you have individual nodes. Each of those could have properties of a layer that you turn on and off. And with more time in putting together the environments, I could show you how to expose those layers. You can filter that down and look at individual parts of that and filter it down. If I come in here in Cytoscape and just specify how many nodes I want to see, I can limit down the nodes. I can extract out just the ones for Department X. All that type of stuff is available once you build the graph. Now, those graphs can be huge, millions of nodes. That's where you start to see the power on that.
So,
Yep.
so you have API calls in the Java code calling the spatial joins that we didn't
Correct. There are API calls, correct. Yeah, I'm sorry.
What other hooks in the database? You already gave us the abstraction layer of views, but what other ratios and
There,
guys are calling that are in the database that we need to also?
yeah, there are definitely API calls that are in there that are going directly to the Oracle database to do all this, and that's where you're getting a lot of the power in that.
Your tool is something the software compiler is a rendering tool.
The software, yeah, Cytoscape is just rendering something. The graph exists in the Oracle database. Let me show one other thing real quick. For those that are interested in business intelligence type applications, we've also implemented, this is just a BI dashboard, something called Oracle Business Intelligence or Oracle Analytics Cloud. And this is a implementation of a graph inside a BI tool looking at, this is something called a force-directed graph. If you're interested in more of this type of stuff, I can talk about this. This is mostly on, property graphs, but this is then running in a BI tool. And then each of these things, as I pull them out, you can, because they have properties with them, force-directed properties, they'll move around as you do that, expand, contract, all that type of stuff that you would expect on here. So I can explode each one of these and look at the data for multiple departments and such. Anyway, with that, I think I'm out of time, but I'm going to be around all day. Z or myself would love to talk to you more about that. Come get the cards for the conference I talked about, or the magnetic poetry. Take it back. Would love to talk to you more about this. Thank you, everybody.